All right. Good morning, all. And we are looking at 11 games. No, 10 games on the schedule tonight. And then the 11th box here is for me to discuss something that's going on with the standings. Um, and I haven't included goalies. Goalies haven't been confirmed at this point, so there's not much point in talking about starting goalies. So let's just get down to it. Carolina, 27, 21, and 9. Uh, New Jersey 28, 20, and 8. Carolina's 6, 3, and 1 in their last 10. New Jersey's 4, 6, and 0. They're both wild card teams. This is wild card 1, wild card 2. Carolina's 1 point behind New Jersey, and Philly only sits 2 points ahead of New Jersey for third place. So, which means Carolina's only 3 points back of third place in the division. Of course, the bonus for being third place is playing Pittsburgh right now. So I don't know how much of a bonus that really is. But for Carolina, they're coming in on a very solid run, and New Jersey, it's been a bit of a learning curve for Jersey, and they've got to learn quickly because right now the New Jersey Devils are flirting with missing the playoffs, which is seemingly fine because there's other teams that are flirting with it too, and it's a flirty bunch in the East. Uh, and I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how this works because there's 16 teams in the East and 15 in the West, and of course, coming into this season and then last season, there was always talk about it's not fair to have 7 miss in one conference and 8 miss in the other, and it's not fair to the East. And yet, it's the East where the weaker teams are likely going to make the playoffs, and that's a benefit for New Jersey and definitely for Carolina as well. But Carolina has been a lot better the last couple of weeks. I expect it to be Cam Ward. It'd be interesting if Corey Schneider was back tonight, but that's not likely the case. Um, as far as the talk about Kincaid not playing particularly well during Schneider's not being in the lineup, Kincaid had half decent numbers as a backup at one point. He's probably just getting overplayed. So that's why when I look at good numbers for a backup, I don't necessarily see a starter every time because that does happen where a guy gets starts every other night, and it's just they're not consistent enough to get it done. But they're both in a good spot right now, and it's up to them to make it work. So it's up to New Jersey to turn this thing around. And there's a lot of kids in this lineup that are getting played a lot. And I always get nervous when you have a lot of rookies that are playing a lot of minutes because they do tend to wear down by about the 50 game mark. Does that sound at all familiar here? Because they're 56 games into the season. Now they're 4 and 6 in their last 10. It's usually around 50 games where rookies might hit that wall. Not all rookies do, but a number of them do. LA. So LA's 30, 21, and 5. The Pittsburgh Penguins 32, 22, and 4. LA's 6 and 4 in their last 10. Pittsburgh's 7, 2, and 1 in their last 10. Pittsburgh's 3 points out of first in the division. LA's 3 points out of a wild card. Um, I do think that all of our celebratory feelings towards Pittsburgh's misery early in the season, I regret those now because it's sort of like a bully got punched in the nose and fell down, and the whole crowd cheered. Now that bully's back up and he's punching everybody who cheered. That's Pittsburgh. And right now, LA looks like they're geared up for a bloody nose, which would be fine with other fans in Anaheim and San Jose because you ask anybody in Anaheim and San Jose or of their fandom, and they're going to tell you how dirty a team the Kings are. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but Dustin Brown arguing that he didn't really do anything wrong just baffled me. I mean, when the NHL's already made its ruling, I wonder too, like if you're suspended by the NHL, and you come out and you argue against it publicly, isn't that the same thing as coaches coming out and arguing about officiating? Remember, coaches can get fined for coming out and saying anything about officiating. So can GMs. If you come out and you say the officiating in that game sucked, the referees really screwed us, the NHL will give you a call and you get fined if you're the coach. But if you're suspended, you can come out and say, this is stupid, I don't agree with this, blah, 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 and nothing happens. It's kind of strange. Maybe it's because they're already being fined via the suspension, so the NHL just leaves that alone. But I don't necessarily agree with the gag order on coaches and GMs, but I understand why it's there. So I don't know. It's one of those things. But The Kings come in against the Penguins tonight, and for Pittsburgh, it's a home game. The Kings are they're a good team, but I do think the Penguins should be able to win this one, regardless of who's in net. I mean, if Jari were in net for, I think Jari gets sent down. I think it's dismissed the backup. Anyways, I'll just say Murray and Quick then, but I would take Murray right now and out of the two. I think Murray hurt us too when early on in the season we're like, maybe he's not that. Yeah, no, he'll figure it out because the Penguins will figure it out just to make everybody else miserable. The Rangers 27-25 and 5. The Islanders 27-25 and 6. I've been really interested in watching the Rangers and the Islanders over the last few weeks because they seem to kind of almost be mirroring each other. The Rangers 3-5 and 2 in their last 10. The Islanders they're 3-7 and 0 are the Rangers. 3-5 and 2 are the Islanders. They are 3 and 4 points out of the wild card. So the Islanders are 3 points out. The Rangers are 4 points out. The Islanders have a goal differential of -20. The Rangers have a goal differential of -9. They're very close in terms of their records, their recent play, and yet they seem to be trying to go in two different directions. New York Islanders fans are trying to get Gar Snow fired. There's a fire Snow movement that's going on. Rangers fans, I think, would be okay with Alain Vigneault being let go, depending on which Rangers fan you talk to. Not as much talk about Jeff Gorton, and yet the teams are in a similar spot. The Islanders have some high-profile free agents they want to keep. The Rangers have some high-profile free agents they want to unload. So even though they're within 1 point of each other, it is quite the different tale being told here. The Islanders want to salvage this year, and the Rangers are ready to throw in the towel and retool for next year. And yet they're only 1 point apart, and they're playing very similarly. The difference really is the Islanders' defense has just been just allowing way too many shots on net. And for the Rangers, the goal scoring is kind of dried up for them. Their defense hasn't been as porous, and Henrik Lundqvist is still standing on his head every night. Not that Halak isn't. Halak has to because he's trying to avoid all those pucks getting shot at him. And a lot of them still hit him because he's a good goaltender, and that's kind of what happens when you're a good goalie. You're acrobatic, and pucks have a way of hitting you when you're playing that way. But yeah, if the Rangers can generate the kind of shot total tonight that other teams have, then the Rangers should win this because they have the offensive guns to do it. If the Islanders can hold those shots against down, the Islanders have the offense to break through whatever the Rangers have out there, because Rangers fans will tell you their defense isn't stellar. This really could be a 7-5 game. This is one game I'll look at going into tonight and I say this could be a really high-scoring game. But the players will be sure to tell that tale. Next up, Detroit 29-23 and 9 against Tampa 38-16 and 3. Detroit's 5-3 and 2 to keep their flickering playoff hopes alive over their last 10, and Tampa is an uncharacteristic human 6 and 4 in their last 10. Detroit is 8 points out of the wild card, but they're 20 points behind third place Toronto. So if you're wondering how far would Toronto have to fall, yeah, they'd have to fall 20 points for Detroit to catch them. So Toronto, Boston, and Tampa are in the playoffs. Tampa Bay is only 1 point ahead of Boston and 4 points ahead of Toronto. So for Tampa Bay, right now we're seeing the first time where the heat's really on them, where there's really pressure on them to play well, or they could face falling. They had been pretty far ahead. I'm pretty sure they had a double-digit lead in their division at one point, and that's gone. So if they lose to Detroit tonight, they're in trouble, because Boston has games in hand on them too. I think they have one game in hand on Toronto. Kind of hazy on that, but Tampa doesn't want to keep putting up 6 and 4 type records in 10 games while the Leafs are winning 9 out of 10. Boston's not losing in regulation, and both teams look like they're ready to chase Tampa down. So we for months have said, all right, well, Tampa's home and cooled, and they're not. And Detroit, it's really weird that they're 8 points out of the playoffs, but 20 points out of moving up in their own division. And to me, that speaks for how strong the three teams at the top of the Atlantic are. Not that they get any respect for it. I remember early on in the season, and even up till a few weeks ago, the Metro really strong, Central's really strong, but the Atlantic and the Pacific are just hot garbage. That's not really the case. Boston and Toronto have both beat some pretty high-profile teams along the way, and so has Tampa. They just happen to be three really strong teams that are in the same division, and I'll get to that at the end of this video because I do want to discuss that. There's something to be discussed there. Calgary, 29-20-8 in Nashville against the 34-12-9 Predators. The Flames 4-4-2 in their last 10, and Nashville 6-1-3 in their last 10. The Nashville Predators are 2 points ahead of Winnipeg for first in the division. Calgary are 2 points behind San Jose. But Calgary's tied for points with Colorado. They both have 66. Colorado's played one less game, and Colorado has 30 wins in regulation and overtime, and Calgary has 27. So if the Flames were fighting for a wild card spot, they would be behind Colorado. But because they're in the Pacific, they're third. That's a weak division. And the Flames have to be grateful because, it's been a very inconsistent season. They have the big winning streaks and then the long losing streaks. And I don't know which team they are, and I don't know that they know which team they are. But they're going to find out tonight because Nashville at home is deadly. I would imagine it'll be Rinne. Hopefully Smith's back tonight. I haven't heard one way or the other. I don't think he'll be out very long because it's a minor injury, and yet when it's a groin injury and you're a goaltender, there's no such thing as a minor injury and a groin injury for a goaltender because that affects their lateral movement. So when Smith comes back, regardless of what night that is, watch his lateral movement. I always bring this up, but it's worth noting. Luongo had that issue in Vancouver, came back. I felt it was probably too early because his lateral movement was pretty bad the rest of the year. So watch for that with Calgary because if Mike Smith's goaltending isn't as great as it's been though so far in the season, the Flames don't make the playoffs. So while in Calgary the MVP vote would likely go to Johnny Gaudreau, maybe Mike Smith deserves some of those votes as well because without Smith I don't think Calgary's going anywhere. And for Nashville, this is one of those games where the team's coming in, they're far below them in the standings. They've got to show that they're Nashville at home, and this is our barn. You're not coming into Smashville and getting a win. Next up, the Capitals. The 32-17-7 Capitals, who are struggling in Minnesota against the 31-19-6 and hot Minnesota Wild. Washington 4-3-3 in their last 10. Minnesota 7-2-1 in their last 10. Washington, they're 9 points clear of Columbus. And what I'm saying there is they're 9 points away from missing the playoffs. And I say it because Washington had quite the lead at one point in their division too. At the very least, it wasn't as precarious as it is now where they're only 3 points ahead of Pittsburgh. This is ridiculous. Minnesota's 2 points behind the number one wildcard team, Dallas. They're 2 points ahead of Colorado, the team that has a tiebreaker on Calgary that doesn't matter because they're not in the same division. For Minnesota, they've been on a nice little run as the 7-2-1 in their last 10 shows. For Washington, it's been a bit more of a struggle, and if Brian McClellan's going to make a move, this is a really good time to do it. If you're watching, Brian, just pick up the phone, start calling people because Pittsburgh's got them in their sights, and Washington needs to do what they can to reverse it. I know it doesn't really necessarily matter because Washington having home ice against Pittsburgh hasn't mattered so far, but being the number one seed in your division is a heck of a lot better than having to play third place in your division, especially if trends continue. If trends continue and Washington drops to second, and if Carolina ends up getting that third spot, I really like Carolina to knock out Washington. That for me is an automatic upset. Because of the fact that Carolina, whenever they're in the playoffs, historically, for whatever reason, the Carolina Hurricanes usually at least get out of the first round, and very often will get out of the second round. On those rare occasions, they make the playoffs. And they're due for a run. They've got a new owner now, and since the new owner came in, the record's been better. So this is why when people say, oh, players don't really pay attention to that off-ice stuff. They do, though. There's articles all over every hockey site I look at right now about former players talking about, or present players talking about, the stress of the trade deadline. So players definitely pay attention to the stuff that's happening off the ice. So for fans of Carolina and for the Hurricane players themselves, this ownership change should be fueling what it is. Attendance being up in Carolina and the team playing better. So it makes total sense to me that that would be happening. Next up. So Anaheim and Chicago, the two biggest disappointments in the West. I'm even including the Oilers in that because the Oilers taking a step back is kind of understandable. The Oilers had the great year last year, and there's still a learning curve there. Now, you can't guarantee the Oilers get back to where they were last year next season, but I don't think they'll be this bad next season. But Anaheim and Chicago, they're both veteran rosters. They've both won before, and the fact they've taken this huge step back to me is a huge surprise. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks were picked to miss the playoffs. Easy for me to say. Picked to miss the playoffs by some publications and by some fans as well. But that happened last year too, where people predicted they were going to fall and it didn't happen. And the Ducks were supposed to be the Ducks. The Ducks have been 27, 20, and 11 this year. Chicago's caught the elusive actually being below 500 in this day and age with a 24, 25, and 8 record. Anaheim's 5, 3, and 2. Chicago 2, 6, and 2. And it just keeps getting worse. The loss to Vegas had to be really a real heartbreaker in that they had the 2-1 lead going into the third. They were coming out of that 6-1 loss to Arizona, and just they at least looked better against Vegas, and then it didn't matter in the third for Vegas reasons. And now here we are. Anaheim's 3 points behind the second wild card, which is of course Minnesota. But if you look at games in hand, Minnesota has them. So Anaheim's, and I've said this before, Anaheim's got that problem. They've played more games, and they've got fewer regulation and overtime wins, which is your first tiebreaker. So Anaheim's going to have a very hard time making the playoffs. They've only got 24 games left. Chicago, 12 points out of the wild card, and they've got 25 games left. 25 games and 12 points, it's not happening. It's just not. They have too many teams to pass and too many points to make up. So I'll be interested to see what Chicago does, who they sell and who they don't. And I'm kind of surprised by lineup decisions I've been seeing here and there. When I saw Osterley and I'm not sure on the accuracy of this. I didn't see the actual game, but I saw Osterley and Hinostroza were going to be healthy scratches, and I saw Sharp. I'm trying to remember who the other player was going back in the lineup, but Patrick Sharp and somebody else were going in the lineup, and all I could think was, you're really going to put Sharp in the lineup ahead of Hinostroza? Seriously? And you're going to pull Osterley out of the lineup unless Osterley's nursing some kind of injury. You don't. I don't get it. But those are the kind of decisions that get made by men who are smarter than me, I guess. Because Hinostroza and Osterley for me have been the good energy players. So I don't know if maybe they were trying too hard and they were making their other teammates feel bad. But whatever the reason is, they've lost 7 in a row now. So put your better players in the lineup. Why? I don't know why I have to say that. I've been saying it all year. I said it when the Canucks pulled Brock Besser out of the first couple of games of the year. And I get it. People say, well, it was great for him. But he's a fantastic rookie. He could have played his way through it too. Anyways, that's a whole other issue. The winner of this game still probably misses the playoffs, but the Ducks really can't afford to lose this one at all because Minnesota's up here. They're playing tonight at home in a game that they probably win, or at the very least, this game goes to overtime between them and Washington. And if Anaheim loses, Minnesota somehow wins their game, that pushes Anaheim 5 points out, and then you're flirting with just dropping right out altogether. And if you're an Anaheim fan, that's bad news. Next up, Montreal. I will get it out, I promise. Montreal 22, 27, and 7 against the suddenly resurgent Phoenix/Arizona Coyotes 15, 32, and 10. Montreal's 3, 6, and 1 in their last 10. Arizona's 5, 4, and 1 in their last 10. Arizona's above 500 in the last 10 games, and so's Buffalo. If you want to play a lotto ticket, this might be the time to do it, because this is some weird stuff going on in the NHL. Arizona's 28 points out of the wild card, but They have 40 points, and of course, one of the things I'm tracking is whether or not they're going to finish with more points than Colorado did last year when they had 48. It looks like now they should be able to do it. That'd only be 4 more wins from here. They've played 57 games. That's 4 wins out of 25 games. Yeah, they should be able to do that. But honestly, they're going to want at least 6 or 7 wins. You don't want less than 20 wins in a season. You don't want to be at 20. At least get over 20. At least, in today's day and age with shootout and overtime wins, you want to at least get over 20. You can't get skunked and be below 20. Montreal's 12 points out of a wild card and sinking fast. And I think all eyes will be on Pacioretty and what happens there, but I don't think he's getting traded. I really don't. I don't think Pacioretty's going anywhere. Um, and I wonder about this. Like, you look at where Montreal is. You hear all the rumors about who's getting moved, and you wonder just how long ownership is going to allow Marc Bergevin to steer the ship before they say, all right, we're going in a different direction. We're gonna find somebody else. And it wouldn't even matter if Bergevin had made fantastic moves. This record and the fact that Montreal's fallen this far, this fast, I don't know that ownership will put up with that. They'll publicly say they will. They'll publicly support their GM because nobody doesn't publicly support their GM. That's just ridiculous. You have to publicly support the guy who's running your team. Um, that's sort of like the guy who's driving the bus when you're on the bus. You kind of got to trust him, or you might end up hitting a tree. He could make it worse. No, I'm just kidding. He can't make it worse because it's about as bad as it can get in Montreal. And if they lose to Arizona tonight, I will probably load up some pages on Montreal media sites and see just how many calls there are for the firing of Bergevin and everything else. Like the article I read a couple weeks ago on how if he doesn't trade Plekanec, then he should be fired. Bergevin should be fired if he can't trade Plekanec at the deadline. And I'm thinking, Plekanec isn't really worth all that much. So I'm not sure that you can grade Bergevin on whether or not he's able to unload Plekanec, because you're not going to get much back for him. So I don't understand. I've always found that weird that when you unload this veteran, he's not really worth anything. So yeah, it'd be nice if they can, but if they don't, does that really mean they're not doing their job, or does that mean that no other GMs really cared about that guy? Plekanec has parts of his game that are decent. His cap hit's high. Of course, Montreal can absorb some of that after the deadline, and deadline cap space works differently. And I don't have the room on the board to explain the math to you guys, but it does work differently. Um, I just think it's a weird way to grade your GM. So if he trades Plekanec for a seventh, then he can keep his job. Like I don't get it. All right. That being said, why do I have Ottawa? I wrote Ottawa in Las Vegas. I see Edmonton the same as Ottawa. That's weird. Maybe because I was reading an article this morning about how it would make sense for Edmonton and Ottawa if they swapped Ryan Nugent Hopkins from Edmonton to Ottawa for Hoffman, which I think would work fine if Nugent Hopkins wasn't a perfectly capable second line center for Edmonton, and if that wouldn't leave them with a potential issue down the middle since Draisaitl keeps ending up on McDavid's wing. So yeah, it makes perfect sense as long as Draisaitl makes a seamless transition to being the number two center. But there's a reason that Ryan Nugent Hopkins has been the number two guy, and there's a reason the Ottawa Senator, said it again, the Edmonton Oilers are 23-28-4. Vegas is 37-15-4. If at the start of the year I had put on this board that the Oilers would be 37-15-4 and Vegas would be 23-28-4, what would people have said? They would have said, that's too high. There's no way that Vegas will have 23 wins and almost be 500 at that point in the season. They don't have that good of a team. You're crazy. They wouldn't have said anything about Edmonton having a 37-15-4 record. They would have said, yeah, that's great. That means they've built on last season and they're a Stanley Cup contender. Vegas is 6-4 in their last 10, and the Oilers are 4-5-1 in their last 10, but they've lost their last 4. They're 18 points out of the playoffs. Vegas is 10 points ahead of San Jose for first in the division again. So San Jose look like they might be catching up, and we'll get to San Jose in a minute. But Vegas, they're in the driver's seat. As long as they go 500 from here, they're 22 games above 500. So if they just win one, lose one, win one, lose one, they end up with 104 points. 104 points will win that division. I have no doubt in my mind. Because San Jose, who's behind them, is only 11 games above 500. So they'd have to just play out of their minds to catch a Vegas team that plays 500 from here. I don't think that means Vegas is going to let up. Gerard Gallant and the boys aren't going to let up. There's been more cracks showing recently than before, but with Vegas, it's been more of a they look human. They sometimes they come back and they win these big games, but there's been more instances lately where they've started to look more human. But it's a fantastic run they've had. It's a fantastic record they've built for themselves, and the Oilers have really dug themselves into a hole. I feel bad for Talbot too, because that quote that we'll make the playoffs. I have a funny feeling that at the end of the year, that's the first thing people are going to ask him with a microphone in his face. Somebody somewhere is going to ask him. Might be Botchford. I have to discuss Botchford this morning. I don't want to discuss Botchford. But on to happier things. The train wreck that's been the Oilers. I don't really know how you fix the Oilers, because the team that's losing right now is a very similar roster to the team that was winning everything last year. So I don't know. I really genuinely don't know how Peter Chiarelli fixes it, and I don't know if it's going to be his job to fix it. I really don't. Vancouver, 22-29-6, coming off of a loss to Florida at home last night. Now they get to journey to San Jose. It's a snake pit for Vancouver. I don't care if it's a shark tank. It's a snake pit for the Canucks. 30-19-8. The Canucks are 4-6 in their last 10. San Jose's 4-5-1 in their last 10. San Jose's number 2 in the Pacific. They're only 2 points ahead of Colorado. I didn't put Calgary. I put Colorado. Vancouver's 18 points out of a wild card spot. So Vancouver is in the same position as the Oilers. The difference being Vancouver was expected to be in this position. The Oilers weren't. I don't expect a lot out of Vancouver tonight. As long as Brock Besser gets another goal, I'm happy. And San Jose, there's issues with San Jose now. They've moved Brent Burns up to the wing. And if Brent Burns plays more than a couple games on the wing, then we can just take all the Norris talk that I've had and just throw it out and just pretend it never happened. And it's a funny thing, because with moving Burns up to the wing, well, now who's your offense on the blue line? I understand that Burns defensively is suspect, and I may be generous by saying that, but the offense from the blue line is important, and it's been a big part of the attack that San Jose's had for the last 3 years that they've had this going on, where Burns has been out of his mind, and they've had that decent center spot, but maybe they're starting to feel the loss of Marleau a little bit. Maybe this is where they're starting to feel the loss of some of that depth that they've lost over the last couple of years, where some depth guys have gone on waivers to other teams, like a Matt Nieto. San Jose is in a precarious spot, because they are 2 points ahead of the Flames, but if the Flames pass them in some strange, and it could happen tonight. Technically, San Jose 2 points ahead of Calgary, but they played the same number of games, and the only difference is that Calgary's got 29 wins and San Jose has 30. So the records are virtually identical. And San Jose is in that danger territory, sort of, except that 4th place in the division is not a factor in the Pacific. So unless you count, LA is 3 points out of a wild card, so they're 5 points behind San Jose. I don't know, maybe. But even with their struggles, San Jose should make the playoffs. It really shouldn't be an issue. So let's get to those playoffs. Earlier, a month ago, I talked about how changing it from wild card matchups to making it 1 through 8 in the conference would work, and that it would still keep teams out, and it does. If you do 1 through 8 in the conference, you still have teams in the West that miss the playoffs that would make the playoffs in the East. But because of Colorado's win last night, if the playoffs started now and we use the 1 through 8 format, remember, your division winners get seeds 1 and 2. So that's why Washington's number 2 in the East. Vegas would play Colorado. Nashville would play San Jose. Winnipeg would play Manitoba in a matchup of 3 versus 6. 4 versus 5 would be St. Louis at home to Dallas, which is an old-fashioned matchup. And in the East, you'd have Tampa Bay and Carolina, and I would buy tickets to that. Washington would play New Jersey, which would be an interesting one, and I think that would be good for New Jersey to get Washington in the first round. I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. Boston would play Philly, so that's an old rivalry as well. Philly came back from 3 games to nothing down against the Boston Bruins and beat them 4 straight games. In Game 7, Boston had a 3-0 lead and still choked that away too. And then in 2011, they made it up by sweeping Philly. So they got up 3 games to nothing in 2011, and I was like, no, I'm not buying it. Actually, going into Game 3, I was hoping Boston would lose that game so that I wouldn't have to worry about another 3-0 comeback by Philly, but it didn't happen. And then the 4-5 matchup in the East would be Toronto and Pittsburgh. So, yeah, that would be one heck of a matchup, wouldn't it? Can you imagine Penguins fans and Leafs fans going at each other? Oh, those two fan bases, I tell you. Anyways, so there you go. There's the matchups as they'd be in the playoffs if you did a 1 through 8 conference rather than the setup we have right now. It would knock the Flames out. It would mean you'd have 2 teams from the Pacific in the playoffs. 2. And one of them would be Vegas at number 1 against Colorado, and then number 7 would be San Jose against Nashville. So odds are, at most, you have 1 team from the Pacific surviving the first round, and that would likely be Vegas. But Vegas against Colorado, if Nathan MacKinnon's back, that's a great series too. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.